The galaxy is vast, ancient, and ruled by those who believe themselves to be its rightful conquerors. The Galactic Concord, an alliance of war-hardened species, has stood unchallenged for millennia. Their dominion extends across thousands of star systems, their archives filled with the names of fallen civilizations, races crushed beneath their might, consumed and forgotten. Somewhere in those archives, buried under centuries of dust and disinterest, there exists a name. A name that once whispered fear into the void but has since faded into irrelevance. Humans. They were assumed extinct or too weak to matter. No recorded wars. No great conquests. No presence in the galactic arena. A species unworthy of mention. The Zelkarn Dominion, one of the Concord's fiercest factions, was expanding again. Their war engines scoured the outer systems, consuming planets, razing colonies, leaving nothing but submission or ruin in their wake. Then, a discovery, an unregistered human world, tucked away in an unremarkable sector. A colony. Isolated. Defenseless. Their war council convened. There was no discussion, no strategy required. The world was deemed ripe for conquest. A soft target. A backwater settlement of forgotten creatures. The invasion force descended in a storm of steel and fire. The first wave, an overwhelming display of force, cruisers casting shadows over the fields below, armored troops deployed in ranks, weapons primed, prepared to shatter any resistance before it could form. And yet, the humans did not run. No walls, no battlements, no warships rising to meet the attack. Just quiet streets. Fields swaying in the wind. Men, women, and children pausing in their tasks to watch. Not with fear. Not even with confusion. They watched, as if waiting. The Zelkarn commander stepped forward, addressing the first human he saw, a man, older, his hands worn from labor. "You will kneel." The man didn't move. His gaze held something the commander could not place. Not defiance, not bravado, something else. Something ancient. The order to fire was given. A bolt of plasma struck the man's chest. He staggered. Looked down. Smoke curled from his tunic. Then he looked up, and smiled. The ground beneath them felt wrong, not shaking, not breaking, but thrumming. A pulse. A shift. It was then that the Zelkarn felt it. An instinct they had long since abandoned, something their kind had not known in countless battles across the stars. A feeling that did not belong to conquerors. It belonged to prey. The first to fall didn't even understand what had happened. A Zelkarn warrior, towering and armored, moved to subdue a human child. A heartbeat later, he lay on the ground, his throat crushed, his weapon untouched. The girl tilted her head, studying her hands as if seeing them for the first time. The Zelkarn hesitated. This wasn't how conquest worked. The weak should be begging. The unarmed should be falling. Yet the humans did neither. A worker swung a mining tool with the grace of a swordsman, cleaving through an armored soldier, as if he were paper. A farmer, untrained in war, dodged incoming fire with the precision of a veteran assassin. A scholar calculated angles of attack mid-movement, evading plasma rounds before they were fired. The humans were learning. Too fast. Too perfectly. It was no desperate last stand. It was something else. Something the Zelkarn could not name. The first retreat order was given. It was ignored. Panic set in. Reports flooded the command channel. "They're reading our movements. They're adapting. They aren't dying fast enough." The Zelkarn had faced resistance before, but resistance was predictable. It followed patterns. It relied on numbers, tactics, sheer force. This was different. This was something older. They didn't know the word for it. But the humans did. Instinct. The air itself grew heavy, charged with something unseen. Every human breath synchronized with something deeper, something buried in their very bones. Their movements sharpened, their strikes became precise, effortless. The more they fought, the stronger they became. The more the Zelkarn struggled, the more futile it felt. They had come to conquer. Instead, they had awakened something that had never truly slept. The order for orbital bombardment was given. The Zelkarn believed in overwhelming force. If the ground assault faltered, they would burn the land itself. The fleet above adjusted firing solutions, targeting population centers. And yet, before a single shot could fall, humans were already moving. Not retreating. Closing in. A soldier raised his rifle, only for his target to vanish, too fast. The human reappeared an instant later, wrenching the weapon from his grasp, turning it against him with an efficiency that defied explanation. Others watched their comrades fall, tried to adapt, tried to fight back, but it was no use. Every failure only made the humans stronger. What should have been a massacre was a lesson, and the humans were learning at an impossible rate. A squadron of Zelkarn warriors, elite among their kind, launched a coordinated assault. Their movements were precise, their weapons unmatched. Yet before the first blow could land, they were already dead. Not from bullets or blades, from miscalculation. The humans didn't overpower them. They outthought them. A girl weaved through the battlefield untouched, as if knowing where every attack would land before it was even made. An old man struck with the force of a siege weapon. A scientist guided others with strategies that unfolded too fast for the enemy to counter. There was no longer a battle. There was only inevitability. The Zelkarn commander's hands trembled as he transmitted the distress call. His voice cracked with something unfamiliar. Not anger. Not defiance. Fear. No one had feared humans for centuries. Now, they would never forget them again. The flagship's escape thrusters roared to life. The last of the Zelkarn forces scrambled aboard, their armor scorched, their weapons trembling in their hands. This wasn't a retreat, it was flight. A desperate attempt to leave behind what should never have been disturbed. Then silence. A lone human stood on the bridge. No armor. No weapon. Just presence. The crew froze. No alarms had sounded. No breaches detected. He was simply there. The Zelkarn commander reached for his sidearm, but his body refused to move. His instincts screamed at him, louder than ever before. His kind had ruled over 100 species, crushed rebellions before they could form. They were the apex predators of this sector. But now, in the presence of this being, he understood. Predators existed only until something greater arrived. The human spoke. Not in anger. Not in malice. There was no need. You were warned. The words carried weight. Not from volume, but from history. As if they had been spoken before, countless times, across ages long forgotten. The ship's systems failed. Not from sabotage. From understanding. The humans did not kill the remaining Zelkarn. There was no need. The galaxy would hear their screams. The commander was allowed to leave. To carry the message. The Concord would receive it. They would search their archives, their ancient records. And they would find the warnings. They had laughed at the myths. Now, they would pray they remain myths. But the gods of war had awakened. And they never sleep twice. The message spread faster than light. The Zelkarn were undefeated no longer. The Galactic Concord dismissed the first reports, calling them exaggerations, distortions of a failed campaign. Then they heard the transmission. Not a plea for reinforcements. Not a call for vengeance. A warning. Across the known systems, leaders listened in silence. The voice of a once proud warlord, trembling, barely able to speak. Describing an enemy that did not conquer, did not negotiate, did not even rage. They simply woke up. The myths resurfaced. Old records once considered legend. Tales of a species that never lost a war, not because they sought battle, but because they had no equal when forced into it. A species that once burned so brightly, they vanished before the galaxy could comprehend what they were. Now they were back. Observers were sent. They expected a war camp, training grounds, the ruins of a battlefield. Instead, they found farmers, engineers, teachers. The colony looked untouched, as if nothing had ever happened. The humans did not celebrate. They did not arm themselves for conquest. They simply returned to their lives. Because for them, war was not a pursuit. It was a state of being. The Concord debated retaliation. It would be a mistake. No one dared say it, but they all felt it. The war had already been lost. The humans had remembered what they were. And the galaxy would never forget again. The silence that followed was worse than any battle. The Galactic Concord did not send fleets. There were no declarations of war, no threats of retaliation. The greatest warlords of the known universe sat in their citadels, staring at maps that now felt obsolete. Human space was small, insignificant. Yet no one dared cross its borders. Not out of treaties or diplomacy, but out of survival. Whispers spread among the ruling species. Some called for an alliance, an emergency coalition to contain the threat before it grew. Others argued there was no threat at all, only a reminder. A reminder that for all their might, all their conquests, the throne of war had never truly belonged to them. Some still doubted. They wanted proof. They sent spies, reconnaissance teams, artificial intelligence to analyze the reports. The data was undeniable. The humans were not evolving. They were returning to what they had always been. The strongest civilizations had spent eons perfecting the art of war. The humans had forgotten it, and still, they stood unmatched. What would happen if they chose to remember? The Concord did not send another fleet. There would be no second invasion. Because war was not a battle of numbers. It was not firepower or strategy. It was who you became when there was nothing left but survival. And the humans had never needed to become anything. They had always been that way. Dormant war gods. Now fully awake. The galaxy adjusted, but the fear never faded. Trade routes quietly shifted. Borders were redrawn without negotiation. No official declarations were made, yet entire civilizations treated human space as forbidden territory. No laws needed to be written. No warnings had to be issued. The knowledge alone was enough. Some species refused to believe it. They sent scouts, mercenaries, and assassins, convinced that what happened on that colony was an anomaly. That there was an explanation. That the stories had been exaggerated. None returned. The few transmissions recovered held no screams, no battle cries, just silence, followed by static. Some claimed they had seen something incomprehensible, something their minds refused to process. Others described humans who never moved, never lifted a hand, yet still, the intruders were no more. It wasn't technology. It wasn't magic. It was understanding. A single phrase echoed in the dark corners of the galaxy, passed in hushed voices between those who knew the truth. You do not awaken sleeping gods. The humans never reached out, never expanded beyond their own territory. They never retaliated, never sought revenge. They simply lived. And that was what terrified the Concord most of all. Because for the first time in history, the balance of power had shifted. And the ones who held it had no interest in using it. But if they ever did, the war would not last a day. Time passed, but the fear remained. Empires rose and fell, wars ignited and burned out, but none dared spill blood within human space. The Concord never spoke of it directly, yet their maps showed a silent truth: humanity was untouchable. Scholars debated the nature of their power. Some believed it was genetic, a latent force buried within their DNA. Others argued it was something deeper, something intangible, a force older than civilization itself. Yet the humans themselves gave no answers. When envoys arrived under the pretense of diplomacy, they found nothing resembling a warlike species. No great armies, no weapons factories, no planetary defenses. Just people. Living, working, laughing. As if they had never fought at all. It was a contradiction no one could reconcile. A species that had forgotten war should have struggled to defend itself. A species that had abandoned conquest should not have been feared. And yet, the truth was undeniable. The greatest warlords, the fiercest conquerors, the most battle-hardened civilizations, all of them knew. If humanity ever chose to expand, if they ever decided that the stars belonged to them, there would be no resistance. No war. No last stand. Because humanity would not take the galaxy. It would surrender before they even asked. Legends took root in the dark corners of the galaxy, whispered by those who understood what had truly happened. Tales of a species that did not conquer, did not threaten, did not demand. And yet none dared oppose them. New civilizations emerged, rising with fire and ambition, unaware of the quiet force that loomed beyond their charts. When their war fleets reached the edges of human space, their elders stopped them. No orders. No debates. Just a single, firm command. Turn back. Some didn't listen. They sent their scouts, their warriors, their greatest strategists. Not a single one returned. The silence was enough. Humanity remained unchanged, unmoved by the fears of the galaxy. They built no monuments to war, claimed no territories, imposed no rule. They simply thrived in their own way, among their own people, as if nothing beyond their borders even existed. But the galaxy knew better. Every warlord, every ruler, every empire that had ever dreamed of expansion knew the truth they would never speak aloud. Power was not about taking. It was about knowing you never had to. And in that truth, the galaxy understood its place. Because for all their fleets, for all their armies, for all their might, they were only pretending to be gods. And the real ones had already woken up. The galaxy moved on, but the weight of what had been uncovered never faded. The Concord still ruled, still waged their wars, still played their games of power and control. But beneath it all, a shadow loomed, not in presence, but in absence. Humanity never intervened. They never expanded, never sought to change the balance of power. It was the most terrifying truth of all. They didn't care. They could have shaped the stars to their will, broken empires, rewritten the rules of existence. Yet they chose peace, not because they were weak, but because it was irrelevant. The thought of conquest, of war, of dominion, it was beneath them. That was what unsettled the Concord most. The greatest civilizations had fought for power their entire existence. But humans had already won a war they never needed to fight. The galaxy existed at their mercy, though the humans never called it that. They lived, as they always had. Unconcerned. Unburdened. Watching. Because if the time ever came when they were threatened again, if the stars burned too close, if another warlord was foolish enough to test their patience, it would not be a battle. It would be an ending. A quiet, absolute, effortless ending. Because humanity was not made to rule. They were made for something greater. And gods do not play with mortals.